Welcome back to Nick Lenz's Comic Corner Classics. That's non-classic. This is episode number 1679 and Doubleshot number 1573. We got Spider-Man Fantastic Four of this one. Well, true trades in the series. Excuse me. First up, in the case of Spider-Man, we have a finale for him. You're thinking, a finale? For what? Nick Spencer's run on Amazing Spider-Man. This is Amazing Spider-Man. What volume is this one? This is volume number 15, called What Cost Victory? Yeah, this is the story arc that pretty much ended Nick Spencer's 74 issue run. That was basically released over the course of 3 years. Yep. No, this is a quick 5-parter. Yes, a 5-parter. Yeah, it collects issues 70 to 74. Now, Nick Spencer is the writer of this book with Mark Bagley in the artwork. He does the majority of the artwork here. Chris Gage co-writes the last issue here, issue 74. The artwork, mostly for 73, is basically just Frigo Veniti. Well, the first 4 issues. And also Frigo Sabai and Z. Carlos. Marco Ferreira and Carlos Gomez. And Mark Bagley pretty much doing issue 74 because it's like 6. You have Marco Ferreira, Z. Carlos, De Knives, Carlos Gomez, even Velez, and Humberto Ramos. Yeah, interesting that they brought him back. Yeah, and they also have a 200 page done by Jane DeMatia, Sal Bushman, Bob Shurin. The cover is done by Patrick Gleason, Alexander Suchet, who surprisingly Patrick Schultz is not Schultz. Patrick Gleason does not do the interior artwork. Most for this point, we finally wrap up the Kindred stuff. Yes, and it's a bit of a weird conclusion. I have heard this was not the original plan, basically, for this story. You have majority of the story, basically, you have one portion of the story focused on Mephisto and Doctor Strange, referencing the events of the most despised Spider-Man story of all time, One More Day. I call it that. I'm sure my friend Divya basically would agree. It's terrible. The only good about the book is the artwork. Yep. So, basically, you have, aside from Spider-Man fighting basically his entire rogues gallery in this storyline, we also have fighting the Kindred. And then, of course, we have apparently Mary Jane being with the Kindred. And then Kindred removes the mask. And then she says, Gwen? Okay, now there is something here about that. Okay, now there was rumors swirling when this issue came out last year that this Kindred was in fact the resurrected Gwen Stacy, possibly not Gwen Stacy clone. Nope. It's Sarah Stacy. Sarah, they do a bit of retconning here. Sarah is from the story Sin's Past. A very much disgusting story involving Norman Osborn apparently raping Gwen Stacy before he murdered her. Yeah. And then revealing that there's 2 Kindreds here. Yep, that's Gabriel Stacy in the other one. And then, of course, this story pretty much retcons several things. Oh my gosh. They basically retcon Sin's Past, which, of course, everyone hates that one. And they also retcon something happened post One More Day. At the start of One More Day, post One More Day, we had the return of Harry Osborn. And it was later revealed, I think it was Sly who did this. I'm not sure which writer did this. But they revealed that he actually survived the events of Spider-Man 200. Where Mysterio was involved with faking his death. According to this, that story was a lie. Yeah, turns out Harry Osborn did indeed die back in Spider-Man 200. So that means that the Harry Osborn we've been seeing for the past 14 years is a clone. Yep, they retconned it's a clone. By the way, they referenced the American Son miniseries. Yeah, I thought that was interesting, referencing that thing. Yeah, that was a series that came out about almost 12 years ago, involving Gabriel Stacy put on the American Son outfit, and of course Norman Osborn claiming that Gabriel is his son, and it turns out, no, they're just a couple clones. Yeah, and it turns out the Sin's past story is also nothing more than a big fat lie. They're not actually the children of Gwen Stacy, they're just created clones created by Norman Osborn. Yes. And they also reference the fact that when Gabriel Stacy showed up to fight, well, Harry, that was a clone of Gabriel Stacy. Because the original Gabriel Stacy is just a clone. Clones! Yes, clones. Clones, 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 clones. And you see why this conclusion has been disappointing for a really good run. Yeah, then pretty much at the end of the story arc, we actually have the death of Gabriel Stacy and his sister Sarah Stacy. Yeah, they both die. And it's also implied that we also have now the red herring thrown out there. This was Harry Osborn on the mask. And it turns out, nope, Harry Osborn, it was not the Kindred. At all. And then, of course, Kendrick kills the Harry Osborn clone, and he dies in the arms of his father, Norman Osborn. And then Spider-Man walks away, goes out with Mary Jane, and possibly plans to make it back together again. And I'll get some more of that in a minute when I talk about Spider-Man Beyond. It's a very interesting story, to say the least. I like the Sister War stuff, where him fighting the whole Rogues Gallery, including some of the villains from his own Rogues Gallery. Sister War was fantastic. This book was okay, per se. I at least enjoy the artwork, some of the storytelling is pretty interesting. But there are some positives thing. Since past hasn't retconned to be nothing more than a big fat lie. They also retconned the whole thing with Harry Osborn. I thought that was interesting. And they also retconned the events of America's Son. Not saying it didn't happen, per se. It's just that they retconned where that Gabriel Stacy was just a clone of another Gabriel Stacy. Yes. Also, the whole thing with the Kendra revealing there's two Kendreds. I thought that was interesting. That was a really interesting plot twist. Yeah, simply put, they pulled a plot twist from Scream of all things with this. Yes. But the ending, the last page we see here is a quite happy moment with having Peter Parker and Mary Jane making it on top of the Empire State Building. That was a really nice touch on the part of the artist doing that. But yeah, it's a pretty good story, but not as good as basically a lot of people thought it would be. I'm gonna give this book a 9 out of 10. Final thoughts on Nick Spencer's run on Amazing Spider-Man. If you think about it, Nick Spencer practically saved this title. Why? Because Dan Slott had probably by far one of the most hated runs in recent memory. He stayed in this book for way too long. Oh my gosh, he stayed on just too long. Yes, because at the start of his run, it was actually pretty good. And then as time went on, it became hated. There was some really bad storytelling with Dan Slott basically on board. Nick Spencer basically redeemed it, basically by having a volume Amazing Spider-Man last longer than the 2-volume Slott did. Yeah. And also, it came with really interesting stories. Like, when we started this one, he had 2 plot threads. Excuse me, the Kendra one, that was one that was kind of like the main thread this whole run. And also, we also had the whole thing with Kraven the Hunter, giving him one last goodbye before we kill him off again, despite the fact we just brought him back. Like, when he died, I think it was in 2019, I think it was, about 3 years ago. He had been back at that point for at least for almost a decade. And prior to that story, Kraven the Hunter had avoided the Peter Parker Spider-Man for like almost 10 years. And then he finally fought him again. Because between Grim Hunt and popping up in that book, he popped up in Spider-Girl, he popped up in Scarlet Spider, Black Panther, Hulk. He popped up in other books, not the Peter Parker Spider-Man book for some reason. I'm not really sure why Marvel had to do that for. And then we have the clone of Kraven Hunter who does come back for Sister War. And I think he still occasionally appears after that. I don't think he's popped up since then. He also made Boomerang a very interesting supporting character. Yes, Boomerang, a character he wrote in the Superior Forces of Spider-Man series. He probably loved this character so much, he basically made him an anti-hero. This book also had the debut of a couple interesting things, like the Syndicate, a female version of the Syndicate, may have a bunch of female villains who, a lot of them are basically some C-listers, like White Rabbit, the Trapster, Scorpina, who is a female Scorpion, and they're joined by the female Electro. And, like, not much is done with this group at all. They do pop up in the pages of, like, the Mary Jane book, which that was interesting. Before the book got canceled, there were only 6 issues. 6! Yeah, they launched a spin-off book of this one for Mary Jane. With the whole thing of Mysterio, which I thought that was interesting. Of course, they have a reference to Ludwig, an alias that Mysterio assumed back in the 1980s. As part of a story that led into Amazing Spider-Man 200, which I thought that was interesting. Really the idea for that. I like the fact that this whole run was, with the exception of the ending, was thought out. We had beginning, middle, and end for this particular run. And I love all the dialogue Nick's message for this book. It just was a really good run. Like, after coming out the garbage, a lot of the stuff Dan Slott was spitting out, become the expenses run, and it's really good. My friend Edgar is not the big fan of this run because basically he was thinking that they were going to undo One More Day, which I was kind of hoping that too, but I didn't think it was definitively going to happen here. It's like was implied. From what I heard, the original plan for the story, like the final story of this run, they were going to do One More Day. But they changed to doing a much more, let's just say, almost as hated story as One More Day since past. Which, okay, good. You retconned another really bad story. The JMS himself really wanted the retcon with One More Day, from what I heard. But apparently he was not allowed to retcon the really bad story. And from what I heard, that was not his idea to do that story. Just like One More Day. That was told by the editor-in-chief, Joe Quesada. Yes. Also in this run, we have the undoing of several deaths that happened over the years. Like, first thing undone in this run was undoing the events of the final issue of Spider-Man 2099 by Peter David, by basically getting rid of that new 29 timeline. Thanks to that 2099 storyline that happened in Amazing Spider-Man, it had a bunch of, like, one-shots, which I thought was really good. That was kind of weird. That was the other thing he undid from Peter David. He also brought back the Sin Eater. I thought that was interesting. That was a very interesting idea. Bringing back the Sin Eater. At least he did something with it. At least it was a really good story arc. Last Remains. But that was not the only death he did the story arc this run. He also basically revived Electro, a character who was killed off. Like when he came back last year, it had been the first time in, get this, at the time it was brought back, it had been 6 years since his death. Yeah, he got killed off at the start of the relaunch of Amazing Spider-Man after Secret Wars. He got killed off by his revived girlfriend, issue 1. By making out with him. Yeah, and that girlfriend became the female Electro. Frances Ray. No, Mercury. Frances Rye, I think her name is. Which, that was something Slott did when he basically brought the character back. And here's the weird thing about the female Electro. Since Ben Reilly's become a sort of an anti-hero, as far as I can tell, she's not encountered him since events of Clone Conspiracy. Which I'm like, that's kind of weird. Like, I would have thought, though, maybe the current Beyonce would have encountered him, but no. Not really. Yep. What else? Oh yeah, I love the fact that we deal with some of the return to Ravencroft. I was really needed to bring that back. Of course, that came back because of the events of Absolute Carnage, which the time for Missing Spider-Man preceded the 29 stuff. We had a return of Norman Osborn as the Green Goblin. Yes. And apparently the city removing his sins, the ghost, that apparently was brought back in the current Amazing Spider-Man. I'll get to that in a minute. Yeah. But just a damn good run. I like it. I think that he did a good job with it. And I was kind of surprised though to see that, because you know what Marvel's know what MO is? Whenever Rare wraps up a run for a book, you know what they do? They hit that restart button number 1 because they love that number 1. But no, surprisingly they didn't. They kept them going. And I did hear, yes, the book is getting relaunched to #1. I get kind of the reason why. Beyond is not that good of a story arc. I like some ideas with it. Like, it was an interesting thing. They turned the clone of Ashley Kafka into the Goblin Queen. I thought, wow. Oh yeah, apparently she got the sins of Norman Osborn. That was something to discuss when I talk about Spider-Man Beyond. And you know the weird thing about right after this story arc wrapped up? Peter Parker ends up in a coma, and Doctor Strange dies. Yep, that's the weird thing that happened right after this run wrapped up. Like, we had Doctor Strange get killed off, and Peter Parker in a coma briefly, and then basically trying to get out of the hospital. Oh yes, and I have heard that John Romita Jr. is coming back to the book. First time since New Ways to Die. Yep. Alright. Now move on to the Fantastic Four book. Fantastic Four, Volume 7. Forever Gate. And this one is over the end of the slot, and it's not a piece of garbage. And this book contains issues 25 through 30. Yep, 25 to 30. You have R.B. Silva does basically most of the issues in here. Does issues 25 to 28. Z. Curl does 28, 27, 29, 30, and 27 also by Hal Remus. Now, oh wait, by the way, the cover art here is there's also a Science scene of Paco Medina. The cover artist, which I don't list. Okay, the cover artist is for 25, 26, and 20. Basically, most of the time it's Jesus Abreu and Chris O'Hare. This issue 27. Now, there's several things happen here. 25 is a very, let's just say, an issue that basically ticked a lot of people off when it came out. Oh yes, it did. It didn't bother me very much. It bothered a lot of other people. In this issue, we have Franklin Richards, lose his powers. Yep. And it's also viewed in this issue, according to Slott, the way he wrote it. Apparently, despite the fact he's been classified as Omega Mutant for decades, turns out that was actually a lie. He was never a mutant. So basically, he's forbidden to come to Krakatoa. Yep. There's also a backup story that's a follow-up from Empire, which of course Slott wrote that, where, get this, it also happened like with the Return of the Watcher, which, by the way, I love it, where he actually sort of gets a recap. A lot of the stuff that's happened since the events of Original Sin. Everything that's happened. All major stories like Access, Secret Wars. Surprisingly, there's no mention of Civil War II or Secret Empire. There's a mention of Absolute Carnage, War of the Realms. I love the fact Slott basically references a lot of the good stories. Now, Secret Wars is a good story. I like it. I think it's a bit, has slow pacing with it, and the delays with it was really stupid. But I thought it was really the idea, and also, Nick Fury was free from the moon. For the first time in, well, this just came out last year. He'd been stuck there for 7 years. And he has officially become the Watcher's Herald. I do have a rant about this. I think a lot of people agree with me. Marvel writers, most of them anyways, except for a small handful of them, completely forgot he was there. Yes, these following writers remembered that, oh yeah, Nick Fury's the moon. People like Jason Aaron, the guy who put him there. Dan Slott, obviously, because he referenced in the issue of Silver Surfer, which, glad to follow up with that. And Mark Waid, surprisingly. But did any other writer actually bother to have anybody go to the moon to check on see if Nick Fury's there? No! For 7 years, it's like he's practically ignored. I mean, this is something Jason Aaron set up, and not much is done with it. Nope. We also did something, the whole Forever Gate thing was a device that apparently was basically in the Vax building for years. The Fantastic activated it and ended up basically destroying the Vax building, which was the second time this building was destroyed, but they built up a new one. Don't worry about that. The Fantastic X, as they're called, they are basically told by Reed Richards, despite the fact he had handed off the building to them at the start of this run, right after they came back. He's like, okay, because of this advice, because we created it, we're taking it back to Max building. And you guys can stay on if you want to. Also, this issues has it where we have the final appearance of the Future Foundation. Yes, for some reason, Slott get rid of this awesome group, the Future Foundation. I don't know why. It's one of the most baffling things that Dan Slott does with this book. Yeah, it's kind of odd the fact he got rid of this group. After it was basically the creation of Jonathan Hickman. Yes. Jonathan Hickman created this group. Originally appeared back in Fantastic Four 576. Was suspended in 2020. Yep, they got rid of the group. I don't really know why. They did it right after issue 25. It was like, okay, first we get rid of the powers of... Yeah, first we get rid of, like, Franklin's powers. Now we get rid of the Future Foundation for some reason. I don't know why. It's one of the most baffling things. Now, as the Fantastic X themselves, to date, after issue 25, they don't appear ever again. Nope. Aside from an appearance in Defense of a Negative Zone, they completely disappear. It's like Slott basically just had his guys show up for a couple issues of the book, a one-shot, and that was simply it. The Ricky Barnes herself, who is the sister of Bucky Barnes, who actually joined the Future Foundation in the Future Foundation book, yeah, for some reason that they decided to basically get rid of Future Foundation for some reason. Don't know why, it just that they did. Yeah, I don't get why. It's just that, well, it's almost like Slott had no plans of Future Foundation at all, so they were barely featured in his run. Yes. Despite the fact this group had been heavily featured part of this for years. Heck, appearance in James Robinson's run, a little bit in Dan Slott's run, of course having their own brief series. And then like 26, group's gone. After 10 years of being this group around, by issue 26, the group is gone. Yes, after over 10 years of being around, they get rid of Future Foundation. Yeah, it's one of the most weirdest things. Yeah. And aside from the whole thing with the Future Forever Gay thing, yeah, there's also stuff with the Ultimate Nullifier, which that comes to play again for first time in years. Yeah, there's more Dragon Man stuff here. I at least got handed the slot. At least made it interesting. You brought back the Silver Surfer. There's stuff with Sky, who is Johnny Storm's girlfriend, which I could have thought at one point that she left Earth, but no, she's still here. Yeah, but this whole story arc involving the Future Forever Game set was really good. And then there's tie-in stuff to the events of King in Black, which I thought that was interesting. Yes, King in Black tie-in stuff, which was really good. Yep. And also this weird thing here where apparently Sue Storm is following her brother. Yes. It is brought up, though, that despite the fact he had 3 other girlfriends aside from Sky, apparently she didn't trust Sky for some reason. I don't know why. It's kind of weird. But this actually is a really good story arc. The all these issues are really good. I'll give this book a 9.5 out of 10. It's a damn good book. I'm discussing Volume 8 in a later video. And basically, this leads to the end of Skye appearing in the Fantastic Four book. Yep. Yeah, a character which Sly himself created, and she stops appearing. Yep. Definitely. But yeah, that's going to be pretty much it for this particular video. Stay tuned for the next video, which is going to be a review of the newest chapter of My Hero Academia. Okay, it's the next video. Bye.